There is a very specific kind of silence that only happens inside a family that has something to hide. It is not peaceful. It is not holy. It is the kind of silence that gets purchased, managed, and enforced. And for years, the Duggar family sold the world a version of themselves wrapped in that silence, tied up with a bow, and marketed as the purest, most God-fearing family in America. 19 children, matching outfits, scripture at breakfast, a television deal that turned their lifestyle into a brand and their brand into an empire. And at the center of it all, Bob Duggar, patriarch, politician, promoter, a man who understood long before most people that a camera never shows you what is happening just out of frame. But here's what nobody tells you about carefully constructed images. The moment one brick falls, the whole wall comes down with it. And today, we are going to walk through every single brick. We are going to trace exactly how Joseph Duggar's own words, his own recorded voice, his own confession, became the thing that no amount of family money, no spin doctor, no loyal sibling army could ever fully erase. We are going to show you how a family that spent decades perfecting the art of looking innocent accidentally handed prosecutors the one thing they can never take back: the truth, spoken out loud, before the lawyers arrived. So if you are new here, welcome to Jenny Exposes. This channel exists for one reason: to pull back the curtain on the stories that powerful people desperately do not want told. And this one has everything. A confession on tape, a father in panic mode, a victim who deserves to have her story heard, and a reality TV dynasty that is watching its carefully curated legacy crumble in real time. Before we go any further, if you want to stay ahead of every single update on this story and the dozens of others we are covering, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel, because we are not stopping, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Let us start at the beginning, because to understand how Joseph Duggar self-destructed, you first have to understand the world he was raised inside. The Duggar family did not just practice their faith, they performed it. Every meal, every courtship, every skirt length, every homeschool curriculum, all of it was not just a personal choice, but a public statement. Bob and Michelle positioned themselves as proof that if you followed the right rules, if you submitted to the right authority, if you kept the right image, your family would be blessed, protected, set apart. And for a very long time, television audiences ate it up. 19 kids and counting was an appointment viewing. It was comfort food for a specific demographic that wanted to believe the world could be that simple, that clean, that wholesome. And that image had real financial power. Sponsorships, speaking engagements, book deals, political connections. The Duggar name became a currency, which means protecting that name was not just about pride or faith, it was about money. And that is the detail that changes everything you are about to hear. Because when Joseph Duggar allegedly sat across from the father of a then 9-year-old girl and admitted what he had done, the first instinct in that family was not to call a counselor. It was not to call a pastor. It was to call Bob. And Bob's first instinct, every single time, without exception, is to calculate the cost of exposure. Not the cost to the victim, the cost to the brand. Now let us talk about the confession itself, because this is the detail that no amount of legal maneuvering can fully undo. According to reports, Joseph did not simply deny what happened when confronted. He admitted to the victim's father that his intentions had not been pure. Those are not my words. Those are the words reportedly used by Joseph Duggar himself. Not pure. That is the language of a man who has been raised in an environment where purity is the highest possible virtue, and who, in a moment of confrontation, reached for the vocabulary he had been taught and used it to describe what he had done as a violation of that standard. And then it happened again. Law enforcement got involved, and Joseph Duggar, according to the available reporting, spoke to a detective on a recorded call. Recorded, as in every single word is permanently preserved and potentially admissible. The phrase "not pure" came up again. The admissions came out. Not under coercion, not under duress, voluntarily, in his own voice, on a recording that now exists as part of a legal record that no Duggar family attorney can make disappear. This is what we mean when we say self-sabotage. Joseph Duggar, reportedly operating on the belief that honesty, combined with family resources, would allow him to manage the situation, handed investigators a gift. And the moment that tape existed, everything that came after every "he is innocent," every coordinated family statement, every social media post about prayer and false accusations became a story that had to be told alongside that tape. You cannot unring that bell. You cannot unsay those words. The confession does not care about the family's PR strategy. Now here is where Jim Bob Duggar enters the picture, and this is where the story gets genuinely fascinating in the worst possible way. Because Jim Bob is not simply a concerned father. Jim Bob is an operator. He has spent decades managing the public narrative of a family that has repeatedly, privately, faced situations that would have ended any other public figure's career. The older audience here knows exactly what we are talking about. This family has survived revelations that should have been career-ending, and every single time, Jim Bob has managed the fallout through a combination of silence, spin, strategic timing, and the raw financial leverage he holds over his own children. After a few days passed following Joseph's arrest, something interesting happened. The tone shifted. Completely. Suddenly, the story was not about a confession. Suddenly, it was about a conspiracy. Suddenly, Joseph Duggar was not a man who had admitted to a detective that his intentions were not pure. He was an innocent man, a godly husband and father, a victim of false allegations, a target of people with agendas. The family closed ranks with a speed and coordination that tells you everything you need to know about how prepared they are for exactly this kind of moment. And you have to ask yourself, where does that kind of instant, coordinated narrative reversal come from? It does not come from grief. It does not come from shock. It comes from a plan. It comes from someone at the top of the family structure deciding that the confession cannot be the story, that the family's survival requires a new story, and that every member of that family better get on board immediately or face consequences. And that brings us to something we need to talk about directly, because it is one of the most uncomfortable elements of this entire situation. The Duggar family's control over its own members is not casual. It is not simply parental influence. There are credible, documented accounts of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, that bind Duggar siblings to the Mad Family Inc. structure. This means that brothers and sisters who might otherwise speak honestly about what they have witnessed inside this family are legally and financially silenced. They have social media income, brand partnerships, and business arrangements that are tied to their compliance with the family line. Think about what that means in practice. If you are a Duggar sibling and you have built your entire livelihood around your association with the family brand, and Jim Bob makes clear that telling the truth publicly will cost you that livelihood, you have an impossible choice. Your financial survival is hostage. Your independence is the ransom. And that is not an accident. That structure exists because it works. It has kept people quiet before, and it is designed to keep people quiet now. This is also why the witness smear campaign that has reportedly been running against the victim's father, Paul Caldwell, is so telling. The story being pushed in certain circles is that Caldwell is a freeloader, a mooch, someone motivated by money rather than by the genuine protection of his child. Now pause on that for a moment. The father of a 9-year-old girl comes forward about what was done to his daughter, and the response from Joseph's side is to attack the father's reputation? Not to address the substance of the allegations, not to offer any explanation for the recorded statements Joseph himself made, but to tear down the credibility of the man who stood up for a child. That is a classic suppression playbook, and it is being run with such transparency that it almost functions as its own kind of confession. When your best defense is to call the victim's father a freeloader, you are telling the world that you do not have a better defense. Let us talk about the culture that produced this situation, because none of this exists in a vacuum. The Duggar family operates within an extremely controlling set of rules that govern every aspect of life for people in their orbit. These are not simply personal preferences. They function more like conditions of belonging. Women and girls in this world are not permitted to wear pants. Secular music, including rock and pop, is forbidden. And here is one that might surprise you. Conventional home financing, the way the vast majority of Americans purchase property, is reportedly considered spiritually problematic within this framework, which means that families who want to remain in the Duggar orbit, who want access to the community, the business connections, the social standing of those families, have to accept these rules as the price of admission. What does that create? It creates people who are dependent on Jim Bob's approval for their social world, dependent on the family structure for their economic stability in some cases, dependent on the community for their entire sense of identity. And people who are that dependent do not blow the whistle. People who are that dependent look away. People who are that dependent repeat the family line because the alternative is losing everything they have ever known. And within that world, something else has been allowed to operate. We are going to talk about the people Jim Bob Duggar has chosen to employ in his various business ventures, including the used car lots that have reportedly served as both income sources and employment opportunities within his orbit. The pattern of who gets hired, individuals with serious prior legal records, individuals who in any other context would be considered high risk, raises a serious question about intent. Because when you surround yourself with people who have their own legal vulnerabilities, you create a circle of mutual dependency. Everyone has something to lose. Everyone has a reason to stay quiet. Everyone has a reason to be loyal, not out of genuine affection, but out of shared self-interest. That is not a community. That is a controlled environment. And here is what makes the self-sabotage angle of this story so compelling. Every single one of these choices, the NDAs, the smear campaigns, the controlled hiring, the rule systems, the financial leverage, every one of them leaves a trace. Every one of them is a thread that investigators and journalists can pull. When you build a machine designed to suppress the truth, you are also building evidence of the suppression. And in a legal environment, evidence of suppression can be just as damaging as the original conduct. Now let us come to the local community, because this is one of the most quietly devastating parts of this entire story. The Duggars have operated out of Tontitown, Arkansas for many years. They built their brand on being beloved pillars of their community. But here is what we are hearing from people who actually live in that area, and this is striking. The residents of Tontitown are not the loyal fan base the Duggar brand machine would have you believe. According to multiple reports and first-hand accounts that have circulated online and in local discussions, people in that community are aware. They are not fooled. And some of them have been remarkably direct about the fact that they would prefer to have nothing to do with this family. The phrase that keeps circulating, and I am paraphrasing here to keep this channel friendly, is that the locals simply do not care about the Duggars the way the outside world once imagined. The mystique, the specialness, the sense of a beloved family at the heart of a tight-knit community. That image does not match the reality of what people who actually live nearby have observed over years of proximity. And that matters legally, because if this case goes to trial, that jury pool comes from those communities. It does not come from the television audience that watched the show. It comes from people who may have a very different, much less favorable view of the family than the brand has always projected. And now we arrive at the detail that, honestly, might be the most revealing single element of this entire story. Joseph Duggar is sitting in custody. A 14-year-old is dealing with the aftermath of coming forward about things that allegedly happened to her when she was 9 years old. A victim. A child who had to find the courage to tell someone what happened to her, and then watch as the machinery of a powerful family turned its attention toward discrediting her and everyone around her. While all of that is happening, while that weight is pressing down on real people, Joseph Duggar is reportedly on recorded jail calls, complaining that the inmate in the next cell is being too vulgar and disturbing his Bible reading. I want you to sit with that for a second, not because it is funny, it is not funny, but because it is extraordinarily revealing. This is a man who, by his own recorded admission, told a detective his intentions were not pure with regard to a child. And in custody, his primary reported grievance is noise interference during scripture time. That gap between what has been alleged and what he appears to be prioritizing tells you something about how deeply the family's culture of image over accountability has shaped his thinking. The performance continues even in the jail cell, even when there is no camera, even when there is no audience. Because after a lifetime inside that machine, the performance is all there is. And that is the tragedy inside the tragedy here. Not that a family has been caught. Families get caught. Not that a man made choices that cannot be taken back. People make devastating choices. The deeper tragedy is that the entire system around Joseph Duggar, the rules, the controls, the NDAs, the suppression, the financial leverage, the spin, all of it was designed to prevent accountability rather than prevent harm. The machine was never built to protect children. It was built to protect the brand. And in building a machine that sophisticated, Bob Duggar has arguably created the conditions for repeated harm while simultaneously making it as difficult as possible for that harm to come to light. But here's the thing about machines. They break. And this one is breaking in public, at scale, with recordings, with documented admissions, with a paper trail that includes NDAs whose very existence proves the family knew there was something to suppress, with a local community that has quietly kept its distance from a family that needed it to be a loyal, loving backdrop, with siblings who, if they were ever given genuine legal protection and financial independence, might tell a very different story than the one Bob has scripted for them. The recorded confession does not care about the family's faith. It does not care about how many children they have. It does not care about their television legacy or their speaking fees or the brand partnerships. It exists on a server somewhere, with a timestamp, in Joseph Duggar's voice, saying the words he said before the lawyers arrived and told everyone what they were and were not allowed to say going forward. Bob Duggar has spent decades being very good at controlling narratives. But the narrative Bob most needed to control was the one that got recorded before he had a chance to step in. And that is the thing about self-sabotage. It always happens in the window before the machine kicks in. Joseph spoke. The tape ran. And no amount of family money, family loyalty, family pressure, or family spin changes what is already captured. This story is not over. It is not close to over. There are more filings coming. There are more recordings. There are people in that inner circle who are watching this unfold and making calculations about where their loyalty is best placed when the walls are actively coming down. And we will be here for every single development, breaking it down, following the threads, and making sure that the people who deserve to have their stories heard are not drowned out by the noise of a family that has been very, very good at making noise when it needs to. If you have been watching this channel for any length of time, you know we do not stop at the surface. We go where the story goes, even when it goes to uncomfortable places, especially then. Because the whole point of this channel is that the truth does not care how powerful you are. It does not care how many followers you have. It does not care whether your legal team is expensive or whether your family has friends in the right places. The truth has a way of surfacing, usually at the worst possible moment for the people trying to keep it submerged. And this story is a masterclass in exactly that. The question now is whether the system will do what systems are supposed to do, whether the recordings will be given the weight they deserve, whether a 14-year-old girl who came forward about something that allegedly happened to her when she was 9 will receive the protection and the acknowledgement she deserves, whether the people around Joseph Duggar who have been kept silent through financial pressure and legal agreements will find a path to telling the truth without losing everything they have, and whether Bob Duggar's extraordinary talent for making bad stories go away will finally meet something it cannot manage. I think it already has. I think the moment Joseph Duggar picked up that phone and spoke honestly before the machine got to him was the moment this ended differently than every other Duggar story ended. You can spin a lot of things. You cannot spin your own voice, saying your own words, on a recording that belongs to law enforcement. Do you think Bob's manipulation machine can survive a confession on tape? Do you think Joseph's own words sealed his fate before this ever got to a courtroom? Drop your thoughts in the comments below right now. We read every single one. And if you have not already subscribed to Jenny Exposes, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because this story is going to keep developing, and you are going to want to be here when it does. We are not done with this family, not even close.